Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I wanted to do a video that's kind of talking about job searching through a pandemic, but most importantly just job searching in general, right? So again, I just graduated undergrad. I will be starting at SLU Law in the fall, but I'm also looking to get a full-time job somewhere. So I actually was hired and whatnot through all of this pandemic and all those types of things going on right now. So I wanted to make a video about it that I think are tips that I use in general, but even more so now through a pandemic and some struggles that I face. So we'll get started here. I am going to be reading off of an outline that I made just because there's a lot that I wrote down that I want to make sure that I cover everything. So if you see me looking down or to the side, that is why. So the first tip that I have isn't specifically for any position that I have ever applied to, but I know some positions require it. So especially if you just graduated, it's a good idea to go ahead and request an official transcript from your university anyway, just so that you can have that on file. Not only just because some places might require that if you are applying for a position that requires a certain amount of schooling, but also because it's helpful to look at different things that might help you with skill set as far as the different courses that you took. I know some more business type of positions actually are requesting for a CV instead of a resume, which is very similar to a resume, but then it asks you about different courses that you took that might directly go with whatever position it is that you are applying to. So that's the first thing that I have on my list here, is just go on ahead and request for an official transcript. Before you apply to different positions or what have you, make sure that you look over your resume. Not just before you send it out, but also right before the interview if you have one. So that is kind of to make sure that you're making edits of everything, making sure your dates are up to date. I know right now I actually have a position on there that I forgot to end, so I had to go back through and actually put in the date that that position ended. So just little things like that that you obviously didn't update yet because you haven't looked at your resume in a while. The other reason that I say this, and that's in my current role as a recruiting specialist, is that it's also really helpful for you because you are more familiar with the job titles and descriptions that you put on your resume, as well as the dates. So that helps you refamiliarize the dates and the end times and the different things that you listed as a skill set that you had in that specific position. Pre-write a cover letter. So a lot of things that set people apart, again, is actually being able to attach a cover letter. Not everyone does them, not everyone requires them, but it's really a nice way to show, one, that you're able to communicate in a written manner instead of just face-to-face or verbally or over the phone, but you're also able to write and communicate what you're trying to say. Another reason that I say to pre-write it is because although these positions might be very different in nature, the meat is what I'm going to call it. The meat of the cover letter is pretty much going to be the same, talking about some basic qualifications that you have that make you a good candidate or a hard worker, and then pointing out whatever position it is that you are applying to and why you would be a good fit. The other part that I have to that same tip is to actually highlight the areas that you'll need to fill in and personalize for a specific job. So for example, say I'm applying to different places and one of them is at a bank or what have you, and another one is at some business analyst bureau or something like that. So making sure that you highlight the title of the job description that you are trying to put in, and as well as the location or the specific company name. So I find that that's an easy way for me to catch anything that I might potentially forget to change, so that way everything is personalized and they don't know that you just copy and pasted from your template. It also helps you remember what specific interview you're going to if you do that, so that way you are able to find that application beforehand, kind of look over the things that you put on that application, and so that way you are ready to go whenever that interview is. Okay. So the first trick that I listed on here and that I think is very helpful is to know the answers to the common questions. So when I say that, most people, when you go into an interview, they're going to ask a lot of the same or similar questions before getting into the specialized questions that might be for that specific role. So the one that I listed was, tell us about yourselves, right? So I've been in a lot of different interviews and they all seem to ask that same question. So I pre-plan that answer before I go on any interview because it helps me get my mind and headspace correct. And I also tailor it to whatever specific interview or different job title that I am applying to. A lot of times people might ask, okay, so if you are currently working somewhere, why are you looking to move? Why are you looking to make the switch? Something that I find really helpful is to actually just kind of not be super honest, because if you're actually unhappy in a position, they might not necessarily want to hear that, because in their mind, that means if you were to leave their position, that you might tell those same things to whoever else that you're talking to and applying to. So instead of saying, oh, I didn't like my job or what have you, you could say, I'm looking for something that is going to challenge me in a different way. So for example, say I am a customer service representative right now, but I'm looking to apply for a business analyst position. I'm just making these up. So maybe I say, I my current position is doing customer service, and although I learned a lot from that specific position, I'm looking to grow my career and grow my knowledge further in the business world. And then that makes a good tie to what you're applying to right then and there. Another common question is, okay, what are you looking for in your new position? And that is actually a really good time to kind of reflect and again, just why are you looking? Is it because you're looking to go into a different role? Is it because you want to have more growth in a company and maybe the company you're working at right now doesn't have that growth? Or is it just because you simply want to try something new? That is perfectly okay to say, as long as you also follow that up by saying, I have all these qualifications and skills that I learned. I know I use the example, I did just graduate, I learned all of this information from my majors and minors or what have you, but I'm looking to really put those into play in my new position. That's something that is probably true, so it's not like you're lying or you're feeding them information that you think they want to hear, but not only that, it really ties into the fact that you are hungry for something and that you're excited about the position that you're applying to. Another trick that I have that I use for any interview that I go on is that you should do your research on what the values or mission statement is of the specific company you're applying to. So again, I have gone on my fair share of interviews. I'm a young adult. A lot of people go through different interviews or what have you. But something that I think is important and shows that you really do care about the positions that you're applying to, even if you've got maybe hundreds of different applications flying out, you most likely won't have the same amount of interviews. So it's really nice to hone in on the specific interview that you are going on and knowing what the mission and the values are of that specific company. It helps you be able to ask more effective questions at the end of the interview, which I'll cover in a little bit here. But more than that, it also really shows them that you care a lot about their specific company and that you did your research in a sense that you see that you could potentially belong with whatever their values are. Okay, so another trick that I have is to pin the email. So specifically for any interviews that I had right now that have been during this pandemic, a lot of the confirmation of interviews or asking to set up an interview have been through email. I think a lot of that is because people are working from home right now, and including HR people. So them sending that email, and you might be getting a whole bunch of different emails about interviews, as well as other things. So it's easy and simple if you just pin it to the top of your inbox. So that way you're able to click through and know that those are the specific interviews that you need to respond to that week. The other reason that I say to pin it to the top is that you automatically see that at the top of your screen every single time you sign into your email, and it'll remind you to respond if you haven't already. So another trick that I have that I think is just not just because not everyone does it, but also just because it's kind of the generous thing to do, is to actually send a thank you and follow up email. So this can be one joint email that has these two aspects to it, right? So not all candidates do this, and it shows that you actually care about that specific role that you applied for, and it shows that you really care that they took the time out to interview you. They have hundreds of candidates all the time, and they chose you for some reason. So in my eyes, the least you could do is send them a thank you for, using that hour or half hour to sit down and really talk to you about the role and the position that you are looking for. The next part here, again, can be kind of after you thank them for their time, and that's just the follow-up. So some interview processes are longer than others, and a really nice way to do that is to just ask them in an email, the same one that you're saying thank you, just asking, I'm just wondering what the next part of the process is, or if I need to be looking out for anything else from you. So that's a nice way to kind of not feel like, to kind of not just come right out and say, hi, so I have a whole bunch of other jobs that I'm applying to, and I need to know when I'll know about yours so that way I can rank them, because that is not something that a hiring manager wants to hear, right? So a good way to make it personal is just to kind of say, hi, so I really appreciate you taking your time out today. I just wanted to follow up and see what the next part of the process is, or if I need to do anything else. And that way that opens the floor up. It's not super pushy, it's very polite actually, and then they'll be more apt to reply. So that is kind of how to do that with the email process. I know, again, some of it is a little different just because we are in the middle of a pandemic, but some of these things still apply even when we're not in the middle of a pandemic. Some of the things oh my gosh, my door just moved by itself, it scared me. But it's because the AC turned on. Okay, so the next part here that I want to talk about are just some of the struggles that might come with just in general applying as an undergrad, or even just right now during a pandemic. So these are some of the struggles that either I faced or I've heard about. So one of the struggles that I face right now, and again, it depends on where you live in the country, but specifically for where I live, Illinois, right now is kind of split. Some places of Illinois are a lot more open than others. And then I also will be relocating to an area that is in southern Illinois. And then right underneath Illinois is Missouri, and Missouri for the most part is open. So they are not under a whole lot of restrictions at all by any means, versus Illinois is still under the restriction, and we're not having people come into the office as much and those types of things. So I think one struggle that I found is what their current situation is and what their process is, and then your comfortability zone, right? So me specifically, just because I am a little bit more cautious by nature, I am a not super anxious person, but when it comes to health and things like that, I am very, very cognizant of that, just because I trust doctors and I trust scientists, and if they're telling us to stay home or not have as many people in the office, then I really want to honor that. So that being said, there are some companies that I applied to that they are full-fledged in the office, traveling, doing face-to-face. I know a good example is if you're applying to any type of sales position, part of the issue with being in sales right now is that a lot of it is making that face-to-face connection, so that way you're selling a product, but you're knowing the person and what it is you're actually trying to sell them and whether or not they would benefit from it. So me applying to sales positions, there are some places that they are not in the office yet. They're doing cold calling, which is another thing that, again, it depends on the person. Then I have some sales positions that they go out into the field, and they are actually commission based off of how many doors they actually touch, get into, and things like that. So the issue with that is during a pandemic, depending on how comfortable you are with doing that, that might severely decide whether or not you go forward with that company. I know me personally, I do not feel comfortable going face-to-face with a whole bunch of different people every single day, just because I also encounter my personal family, my fiance's family. I don't want to accidentally pass something on to that, especially because the CDC is still saying that we should be phased, even though certain states are not doing that. So another thing to kind of combat that is different, and I'm assuming this might catch on a little bit more as the world realizes that not everything has to be face to face, is actually phone interviews and video interviews. So they are very different than your face to face interview for a couple of different reasons. I have done both in the past few years here that I've been applying to different positions, and they all have their little quirks. So a struggle that I have, which I call it a struggle, but it's not necessarily a struggle in itself, but it can become one, is that although you are talking over the phone with people, you just might not be as outgoing over the phone as you are in person. Or maybe the inflection of the person that is interviewing you sounds like they're not super interested in the conversation, and it's really hard to not truly know if you're, doing well, because you don't have those positive affirmations when you're looking at someone and watching their body language. So that is one of the things that I have found that is really weird, and there's no real way to combat that except for just knowing that you're doing the best you could and you prepared as much as you can, and if you did a good job or what have you, then you'll get the job. Even if you do a good job, maybe you don't get the job, but just realizing that there's other things out there, so it just wasn't meant to be. And then the video interview aspect is different just because some places use Microsoft Teams, some places are using Zoom, some places are using completely different interfaces from that, which might be, I know I just had an interview and they used WebEx, which I had never used that beforehand, so I didn't know what I was doing. But basically it's hard to combat that, or the worry of, oh, well, I didn't know that I needed to sign in at this time and it's not working or what have you. All the interviews that I have been on, they're very understanding of having to work out the kinks of technology, because they also had to move home and are doing everything from home when normally they'd have you come into the office. So just as long as you're honest and upfront with them, and just saying, hey, I'm having trouble signing in, but as soon as I can get this up and running, I'll let you know. I apologize, or if we need to reschedule, that's fine too. Just kind of reiterating, this is not my normal character. I'm normally early, or what have you, and again, for the most part, they will be understanding because they also had to move all of their work home. The other thing I wanted to talk about was just the different formatting of video interviews. I had a specific interview where it wasn't like someone was on the other side of the screen asking me the questions and I was responding to them and still getting that face-to-face interaction even though I'm not actually there. It was actually a one-sided interview where they actually had the questions at the bottom of the screen, and I was responding to these questions. Basically, it was just me and reading the question and then responding how I'd respond. And that is weird and tricky because sometimes you just reading off of something, it's very hard for you to still seem upbeat or excited about a position. But again, I would say as long as you're preparing yourself with those same questions that are asked at almost any interview, it's really easy for you to be able to kind of just pretend that someone's there asking them. I know that sounds weird, but if that helps you in your brain, go for it. I know that's exactly what I did. I just pretended that someone else was asking those questions, and I even I know some people don't do this, but I have a habit of, if someone asks me a question that I don't exactly know how I want to answer it yet, I always say, that's a really good question. So I found myself doing that even though no one was asking me that question. I was kind of just giving myself time to think, if that makes sense. So the next struggle I wanted to talk about is not specific to a pandemic or what have you. It actually just has to do in general with just the way that some hiring processes are laid out. And that is the wait time between your interview and getting hired somewhere. So I think I speak for all of us that whenever you're applying to something new, the most nerve-wracking part is not necessarily the interview, but the wait time after the interview. I know I've seen some interview processes the next day, they call that person and let them know that they got the job or what have you. I also, on the other end, have some processes where they never call you back, which means to me, I guess they didn't hire you, but you're also kind of waiting still because maybe you wanted that position, but they just never call. Then I have some places that are right in the middle where they kind of tell you, hey, we are interviewing a couple other people, we'll get back to you by this date or what have you. And for all of those different things, I think it is important to just make sure that you're pre-writing those questions that you have, and that one of them is always, what are the next steps in the process? How is your hiring laid out? Do you know a time frame? Those types of things, because then you actually know and you're responding. And then if you don't get an answer within that timeline, even though I think that they should still reach out to you, even if they don't necessarily hire you, they might not think that way, and that's okay. But that way you know your time frame, and then you can shoot one more email and just say, hi, so I just wanted to check up on my application. I know you said that I would know by this date. Is there anything else that you need from me? And at that point in time, they might say, oh yeah, just wait a couple more days. It's taking us longer than we thought. Or they might go ahead and let you know that you didn't get that position, and that's okay too. So those are all the things that I have as far as job searching. I know I'll title this probably Job Searching Through Pandemic or something like that, just because I think that's really relevant right now, and it might continue to be relevant depending on things moving forward. But regardless, these are all tips that you can really use in any situation, not just because we're in a pandemic. Feel free to leave a comment of a question or anything like that as far as job searching goes. I'll be more than happy to answer those. Like I said, I am currently working as a recruiting specialist before I move on to my new role. So I have picked up quite a few things on interviewing as far as what is good to say in an interview and what is not, and different things like that. So feel free to leave me a comment asking a question about that. If you want to see anything else specific on my channel, leave a question for that as well. And if you don't have anything else, just go ahead and like and subscribe as well. So this is a great topic that I just wanted to talk about. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and you have a great rest of your day. Bye!